everyone, this is Peak Entertainment and we are back again, and we're now going to continue with our ongoing Unrated and Underappreciated series, and this edition we're going to concentrate on, for me, one of the most powerful and compelling movies that I've seen ever, and that is Casualties of War. This is a Vietnam War epic that was released on August the 18th, 1989. It stars Michael J. Fox and Sean Penn, and it was directed by Brian De Palma. The setup here is that we have a story that is based on actual events within 1966 of an incident where a group of US American soldiers kidnap a young Vietnamese woman from her village and go on to brutally subject her to assault and rape her. And we see the following fallout of this incident as we see one man's journey and crusade to seeing justice prevailed for what has happened to this young Vietnamese women. And they do this following a previous incident where they are ambushed in the field and they feel they need to get revenge or retribution for what happened to one of their teammates in the line of fire. And in the lead role we have Michael J. Fox as Max Erickson. He is the one soldier who disagrees with the other squad's actions, and he constantly attempts to prevent what they do to the girl. In contrast, we have the other main character, Sean Penn, who plays Sergeant Tony Meserve, who leads the squadron in the kidnapping, and this is a character that is full of rage and intensity, very much of an erratic and violent personality. So what's good about Casualties of War? Why is it, for me, one of the most outstanding and most powerful Vietnam War films that has been made? Well, I think it remains very much of a compelling drama. It is at times very difficult to watch. It's constantly testing the viewer with its story and its subject matter. This comes in the era of the 80s where cinema was fueled by powerful and strong Vietnam War movies. This of course includes Platoon in 1986, which won multiple Oscars. We had Full Metal Jacket in 1987, Born on the 4th of July in 1990, Hamburger Hill in 1986, and even I would include First Blood in 1982, as we all know is the first entry of the very lucrative Rambo franchise. And all of these films dealt in particular with the psychological effects of the war, the combat, the intensity, and how the people involved were affected both during the war and after the war in nature. And for me, Casualties of War is without doubt one of the best examples of telling its narrative. It's perhaps more narrow in its scope. It's not very much as such about the combat of the Vietnam War. It's much more smaller and intimate, but it's equally as impactful. It still strongly shows us about how much the war affects the soldiers on a psychological basis. In the beginning scenes, we see these soldiers really full of hate, anger, confusion, really at the situation that they find themselves in. They're questioning why they're fighting, what's the purpose of the war. And for me, this is what makes a great war film, where you really see the people, the characters involved, questioning their own nature and what they're doing, because I think as a viewer it makes you appreciate more the story and provokes more thought within the film. If the characters themselves are delving more into what's going on, it makes it a much more of a perceptive storyline as well. The movie's title itself is very significant because I feel it relates both to the kidnapped girl, who is indeed the clear casualty of the events within the story, but I think also it relates to the soldiers as well involved, because they themselves are casualties of the war. At some point prior to enlisting, I'm pretty sure they were very young, naive men with lots of aspirations and ambitions, and we see here that they've been corrupted by the darkness and the nature of war. And this is most notable, particularly where we see a shower scene where we see them really contemplating what's happening to them and what's the overall use of the war and where their lives are heading. It really is a compelling and very contemplative film. There are multi layers and context to the story, and this is what great movies do. It also is propelled by compelling performances, and first off, in the lead we mentioned Michael J. Fox, and when I saw this film for the first time I was very impressed by him, because first of all, the choice of his role really goes against type. As we all know, he was one of the most biggest stars of the 1980s, coming out of the Family Ties television series, of course, and then later on reaching iconic status with the Back to the Future trilogy, Teen Wolf, Secret of My Success. So at this point, Michael J. Fox was really playing very crowd pleasing movies that were very fast, entertaining and very appealing to watch. So him taking on a much more of a darker, compelling story is, I think, a testament to the actor maybe wanting to break out of the comfort roles that he found previously, and his choice is really integral to the story because he is the conscious and the moral compass of the story. His casting is crucial because his small and diminutive size really shows that Erickson is overwhelmed and imposed by the previous squadron. If you cast any other actor in this role and they were 6'1", 6'2", it would really take the power away from the storyline, because in order for this to work, you have to realise that Erickson is at times helpless. You know, he wants to do right, he wants to really stop these soldiers doing from what they're doing, but he simply can't. He's outnumbered and really he's overwhelmed by the physicality of the other soldiers. So Fox provides a very consistent and very carefully constructed performance, encouraging both sympathy and empathy for and the scenes that he has really towards the final act where he reflects on maybe that he should have done something better when the incidents happen are incredible, and it's a magnificent performance from Michael J. Fox. Dare I say, one of the best, if not the best, of his cinematic career. He's equally matched by Sean Penn, who we all know is one of the most accomplished and versatile actors, and in contrast to Michael J. Fox, he's very much intense, scary, very unpredictable and very dark. He's at times brilliant, if maybe slightly erratic, but I think that's in keeping with the character. He is equally compelling throughout. Maybe you want to cast him as the villain if that's so, but I think there's much more complexity, as I mentioned before, to these characters. This is very much a sergeant who I believe is lost within the message of the war. He's lost his soul, he's lost his really sense of integrity and morality, and he feels the only way to kind of regain his own sense of sanity, if you like, is to kidnap this young girl and subject her to these truly traumatic experiences. So it's a brilliant performance as well for Sean Penn. But for me, the standout performance goes to the actress who plays the young Vietnamese girl, and I think her name is Tu Chu Lee, I believe, and she is simply phenomenal in this role. So tragic, so frail, so innocent. You instantly empathise with her, and despite the fact that she doesn't really speak much English, it doesn't matter because she really just draws you completely to the role. What she is subjected to, it really grabs you by the heart, and yeah, it elicits a lot of sadness and emotional, heartbreaking emotions as you see what she goes through. Difficult scenes to watch, particularly when we see the scenes between her and Michael J. Fox as he's trying to rescue her, he's trying to communicate her, trying to find out the location of her village, and of course she's completely traumatized. She's not sure whether she can trust him or not as he tries to help her evade the capture of the other soldiers. It's truly heartbreaking to watch these scenes. What also is another magnificent feature of this film is the musical score by the recently passed Ennio Morricone. We all know him from legendary music from the spaghetti westerns, the Dollars trilogy, heralded by Clint Eastwood and directed by Sergio Leone. He of course provided the music for The Untouchables. It's just a magnificent score, really once again adding much to the emotion and the really heartbreaking nature of this music. It's just fantastic. It's one of his best scores ever, particularly at the ending scene, which I won't spoil, but it really is a heartbreaking conclusion to the movie. There really isn't much flaws that I really can pick out within Casualties of War. If I wanted to say of any flaws, I think it's really only the third act. I think it feels slightly condensed. When we get the fallout of the incident and the ultimate reckoning, I think there could have been maybe a further 5 or 10 minutes added to the original version. There is an extended version which you can find on Blu-ray, which adds a bit more, but I just think we needed much more of an impact. I think the overall announcement goes maybe a bit too quickly. It kind of strays away from what happened during the incident and much more towards Ericsson's life being under threat, and I don't know if that's as important a message as what went on before. So if I had to give a score for Casualties of War, I would give it a 9.5 out of 10. As I've said before, it's without doubt one of the most powerful and compelling Vietnam War movies ever. I recommend that you really watch it. When we concentrate now on the release of Casualties of War, it had a budget of around 22.5 million and it only grossed 18.6 million as at the US domestic box office. I don't think the overall worldwide box office is available. By all means, correct me in the comments. I did do some research, but I couldn't find the worldwide box office. And as I mentioned before, in the clutch of great Vietnam War movies, Casualties of War never really gets mentioned. I think it's because it focuses much more on a singular incident rather than the overall war. So you won't get these intense battle sequences. It's not very quotable, it's not as cliched or spectacular or bombastic or jingoistic as the other Vietnam War movies, and I think that's probably why it didn't fare as well at the box office. It's much more of an intense and darker storyline, really one of those movies that is unflinching in the darker truth that it tells. It really paints the US soldiers in a different light, right? Because normally war movies, they concentrate much more on how valiant, how brave and how courageous these soldiers are, but Casualties of War obviously gives you a different perspective, and I think having these US soldiers really undertake these really harrowing and horrific acts against a young innocent girl wouldn't have been as appealing, I think, to general audiences at the time. So I think that's another reason why it didn't really fare well at the box office. And of course, as I mentioned before, Michael J. Fox at the time was really at the height of his career, providing these more comedic, crowd-pleasing movies. So when he does something this dark and this intense, it probably would have turned off a lot of his fans. And we look at director Brian De Palma, which I think is actually an underrated director. I mean, if you look at the great masterpieces that he's provided, we of course look at the iconic and important and really incomparable Scarface in 1983, the equally masterpiece of The Untouchables in 1987, the harrowing horror of Carrie as well, and also later on with Tom Cruise in the first Mission Impossible, and he later on of course directed Snake Eyes. So Brian De Palma has directed some truly magnificent movies, but Casualties of War never really gets mentioned, and I think that's a crime in itself, because I think it's actually one of Brian De Palma's best movies overall, and it really is deserving of much more recognition and fame, I think, throughout. So those are my overall thoughts of Casualties of War. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you've watched the movie, what did you think? Do you believe, like me, it should have got more recognition at the time, or do you not hold it in the same regard and esteem as the other Vietnam War epics that arrived from the 1980s? If you haven't seen it yet and you go on to watch it in the future, let me know what you think in the comments below. What did you think of it at the time? Do you think it was a major shift and change in pace of the Vietnam War movies? Let me know what you think about its dark nature and its intense storyline and its emotional subject matter. So those are my thoughts for now on a quite brilliant and powerful movie of Casualties of War, very much unrated and underappreciated. Let me know what you think in the comments. That's it for now. Take care of yourselves, stay at safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.